Today's session has been hosted by one of our 3 research themes, in this instance, technological and digital innovations to promote independent lives. This theme is led by Professor Alessandro Di Nuovo and Dr. James Marchang. This cross-disciplinary group develops research focused on how technologies can be harnessed to assist people to be physically active, manage their health and promote their independence. It looks at cutting-edge AI and robotics technologies, and we utilize those to deliver care that is close to the patient and the community, making it more accessible and empowering to stay active and live independently for longer, which is central to what we do. Today, Alessandro and James will introduce their research into intelligent robotics in the care of people, and also look how we address some of the opportunities and challenges they have faced in this area, especially around security and privacy. As I said before, there will be time for Q&A at the end, so you can either ask your question then or write it in the chat during the session. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Professor Alessandro Di Nuovo.
Thank you. Thank you, Jason. Thank you all for joining us. I hope it's all good. You can hear me, you can see my screen, and I would like to start this presentation about the current research that we are doing here at the AWRC around the novel technologies and the great opportunities that artificial intelligence is giving to help health and well-being. So the most important point for us is to put the people at the core of the AI revolution. So we know already, you have seen plenty of examples and evidence on how artificial intelligence can help our lives. But what we really need here is to meet the people's needs. All the things that we need to do is not to just doing things that are working well in our labs, but reach out to the people and ask them what they need, and then implement the services that they want, and this way we can transform their lives. So in our view, I'm talking about robotics, but the robot is the embodiment of the artificial intelligence. So it's the physical thing you can interact with, the physical thing that will provide you the service, but it's the artificial intelligence that is actually providing that possibility to help the people. It somehow is like the smartphones with the internet. So the smartphone allowed the wider population to access to what it was not so long time ago, just something that the university used to play with. So the robots will be the gateway for the advanced artificial intelligence services that we will experience in the future. So now we are researching how we can make this better, and we can prepare them for the deployment into the real world. So in this environment, I would like to briefly introduce the social robotics, which is about providing robots that can simulate social interaction, and then they can use this to provide better services to people. So we range from the telepresence robot that you can use to be physically present, so going around and checking on people and things. Then we have the robotic pets. Then we have service robots that are specifically designed to provide us a specific service. So they only have those characteristics that are needed for that service. And then we have the more complex and probably more interesting humanoids that are simulating the human appearance, and they also have limbs. They have the ability to replicate what the humans do, and these are supposed to be the most flexible platforms. But of course, the current state is that the simpler telepresence robots are those that are easier, cheaper, and they have the maximum reliability, while still the humanoids need research, because they are still in need of providing more efficient intelligence, and of course there are higher costs, so we need to figure out how to reduce the cost, and they are not so reliable at the moment. So this is the area where we are focusing our research and where we will deliver the future services. So just a really quick overview of the projects that are going on at the AWRC. So we are part of Network Plus, funded by the AWRC, which is looking on how to facilitate the emergence of healthcare robots from labs into service, which is specifically looking at how to co-create a sustainable ecosystem to enable the healthcare robots that we have seen working very well in our labs to support people in the community, so to go outside of the lab, and we focus on the issue of frailty. Then we have another project that is just recently started that is looking on how to co-design a friendly robotic service that could be at home and help through assessment of the physical activity and the mental status, and then provide some tailored support and motivation to hold the people to be active, and in this way reduce the risk of frailty. So we have been looking through a sponsorship from IBM on how to use the human-robot interaction to assess the cognitive level of people, which is something that we can use, for instance, to identify early signs of mental conditions like dementia, and also provide some monitoring of the progression of this kind of conditions, and this way help the research and help to tailor the interventions. And then we participated in a large European project which was called Roboteira, and this project developed a series of advanced services to help older people to stay at home for longer and facilitate independent living. So I will present some of the results about this project, but also we are looking at the other end of the spectrum, which is children. So we are providing services. We want to help also the children in different environments. So we can help them in their education. We can help them to in the therapy. We can help them to improve their lives at home. So not necessarily going into the hospital, for instance, but also trying to help the families and the way they are providing the services, and they are caring for them. So going back to the services for older people, I will briefly speak about the Roboteira project that was a large partnership in Europe that was looking on how to implement robotic services for older people. So we, as I said, we went to the user. This is our key characteristic. We work with people. We are not just thinking about the best technology in the lab, but we really want to create something that has an impact. It can transform lives. So we created some focus groups, and we asked what kind of services they wanted to help them in their lives at home. And they provided us a list of services with preferences that we implemented. So we implemented 11 services through 3 different robots that were available in different test sites. So what we did is to implement the services. Then after they suggested what to create, and then we deployed it with in a realistic test scenario, which is mock apartment, and they were deployed in 2 different sites, one in Italy, one in Sweden, and tested by more than 100 elderly people that experimented all the services and provided feedback that we used to improve it, and then went back to them asking if they were likely to use the services. So there is on the paper, there is referenced below. You can find some of the major results, but I would like to focus on one specific point, which was the adoption. So we all know that, especially the older adults, they have a limited knowledge of technology. So we studied how we can improve the services for them. And what we got is from their feedback is that if they already have experience with technology, then the adoption of these the services is mostly related as the so-called facilitated condition and their attitude. So the facilitating condition is, for instance, if the healthcare system provides the robot, if there is availability of the robot. So if there is this availability, they will be able to use it and they would like to use it. Otherwise, if they don't have experience, then the most important thing for them will be the interface. So to create a natural interaction with the system. And this is where the robots are really important, because they provide a natural way of interacting. But most importantly, they provide a multimodal interface, because they can speak, they can interface with sensors, they can interface with tablets, they can interface with a lot of other media that you can use then to provide the services to interact with the person. And this is really important when you are not familiar with computers and other novel technologies. And one of the results that actually demonstrated this is the implementation on one of the services was called full delivery, where the person was using the system through the robot to order the meal and have it delivered at home. So in this scenario, what we noted is that when the robot was speaking, the person, all the older people were looking at the robot, and they were focusing their attention on the robot, except when the robot was reading the menu, which is more like more natural, because it's like what happens at the restaurants. When you go at the restaurants, and then when you're ordering, you're looking at the menu, and you want to have some other modalities, which is in that case was the tablet, to actually have a visual feedback on what the robot was doing. But for the rest, the robot was their main focus. So this is one of the examples, the many examples on how multimodality help, especially older people, because of course, if they have some kind of visual impairment, then they can use the speech. If they have auditory impairment, then they can use the tablet, and so on and so forth. So one of the key aspects of our research is multimodality. And this multimodality comes very handy when we want to use the robots in other areas, like using them as cognitive assessors. So the cognitive assessment is one of the areas in general that can help for early detection and diagnosis, which is not very much ready at the moment in AI robotics. But there are several advantages. There are the standardization of the score, we don't have the assessor bias, and then we can easily update the system with new ways of administering the testing. And we can also, and this is the most important thing, we can also record and provide a large amount of information to doctors for second opinions, for monitoring the progress, and this will facilitate tailor the treatment on that person. So in this area, we created a system which was CATI, this cognitive assessment through human-robot interaction, that actually was a proof of concept of the fact that we can use the human-robot interaction for assessing the cognitive level. And this makes use of all the different sensors and interaction modalities, and to implement a very common cognitive assessment tool, which is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. It's called MoCA, which has been translated in over 70 languages. It's very common. And all of the subset of the test that are looking at different cognitive dimensions were implemented with different ways of interacting with the robots. And what we have found is that, of course, through the optimization of the artificial intelligence to this specific task, we got a system that has no statistical difference between the AI robotic administration and the human administration. So this is the most interesting result. So we don't want the robot to be better because we don't need the robot to be better. We want the robot to be an additional tool in the hands of the practitioners to collect the data and then provide some information about how to treat that person. But it's also a way to reach more people and to screen more people, because the robot will be available while we all know there is not that availability of appointments within the healthcare system. So we performed several studies to demonstrate the reliability of the system. But the most important thing, we also asked to our users what they were thinking about the system. And their experience was really positive, even if we gave no instruction on how to interact with the robot. So was the robot itself telling the instructions and explaining what it was about to happen, and they were all following these instructions to get to experience the system. So this was another important point about the use of multimodality in the robotic systems. So just a very quick introduction to another project, which is the new project that will be looking on how we can use all these sensors and intelligent algorithms to analyze how people are behaving and then provide tailored support for their activity to reduce the risk of frailty. Then looking at the children and how we can help children through robots. First of all, robots will be a useful tool because they are motivating, they are engaging for the children, so they can actually be very keen to use them. And what we have found in some preliminary experiments for a service that has been requested and has been developed with the Sheffield Children's Hospital is to help children to reduce their anxiety before invasive treatment. So we tested and we found that the interaction with a humanoid robot is really beneficial because it helps to take out all the pressure and improves the compliance, which is what helps, because sometimes they have to cancel and reschedule the appointment because the children are too afraid and they are not able to receive the treatment. And one special thing that I'd like to highlight is that one of the children was interacting with the robot by placing his forehead and the stomach on it. And this is something that the robot the children does only to a family member and when he's happy in your company. So this is another additional evidence on how a physical embodied artificial intelligence can actually help to simplify the interaction and help to provide a service to the children in this case. So the last example that I'm going to give is about a project that created additional service based on a humanoid robot that was integrated in the therapy of children with autism and intellectual disability. We tested it for 4 weeks, and the robot was carrying out the task to help these children that, because of their condition, they are not able to learn imitation and emotions. So this training is usually being done by in specialized hospitals, but that is very difficult for them. So indeed, we identified this with caregivers and the nurses. They pointed out that, for instance, for imitations and also to train with emotions, they need 2 members of staff, because these are children with intellectual disability, which means the intellectual age is very low. So in our case, we experimented with children of 8 to 9 years old, but their mental age was 2-3 years old. So they always need constant support. So they need 1 member of staff for support, another member of staff to train in imitation and emotion. So this is unfeasible for the very restricted and healthcare systems that don't have enough staff. So if a robot can do this part and help with this of course is a way for them to provide this service to the children. So what we did, it was to integrate the robot in the video is not starting, I'm afraid. Okay, so we integrated the robot. This is just an example. As you can see, this is at the very beginning. So the child is not really able to do anything if not supported. So it definitely needs support. It needs someone to help to move forward. But after, this is midway, after some of the training, then the child, this is what happens when the child is not is not supported, is of course doing other things, but still now is imitating the robot, is starting to imitate the robot. So we have seen a progress. It is of course easily distracted, but still it's making progress. But then the most important thing at the end, what we have seen, it's the children were able to generalize and interact with the nurses, with the therapist, and they were able to imitate them. So that's the most important thing. So the robot is a tool, is not replacing anything, it's not replacing the humans, it's just providing a tool that in the case of children with autism, it's efficient because they are they have difficulties in identifying social cues. So the robot is simpler for them. So this is a way, is a first step toward learning on human-human imitation in this case, but also human-human interaction. And this is the most important thing for us. So it's preparing them for the real world, not just to with the robot. And what we have seen that they improved their scores. So all the tasks that we trained them, they were unknown, they were able to do them, but also they were able to generalize and then imitate other tasks. So what we have seen also, thanks to the fact that the robot was always recording, we were able to have objective data to support their progress, which is something that the therapists themselves suggested as a very useful tool. So for them, the robot should be a behavior analyzer, should keep the records and provide objective data. This is also because usually these children, they have, because of their conditions, their progress is not linear. They are going up and down, up and down, up and down. So sometimes when the parent come to visit, then what is happening is that they are not behaving at their best, so they may not see the progress, but there is progress. So if they can use the robots, if they can use this data to provide information also to other doctors, this is really important for them. So this is another point where robotics and artificial intelligence is helping. But of course, given that we have a loss of data, one of the limitations is, of course, a human being cannot watch all this data. So what the robot can do, and the artificial intelligence in this case, is to analyze the videos and provide information real time, for instance, to detect attention and distraction, and then provide reinforcement to the children to attract them and to help them to engage with the therapy, or also after to provide some preliminary score, to provide information on how they are behaving and how the therapy is progressing. And then this can help both to demonstrate the progress, but also to assess and tailor the intervention on them. So just to conclude, thank you for your attention. I'll be happy to get your questions after Jim's Marchang talk. That he will now speak about one of the most interesting questions, that is the security and privacy, because we are using these robots, we are using all of this to in healthcare systems, which means they will interact with us and get information. So they need to learn what is private and how to securely keep it. So without further ado, I'll give the floor to James. Thank you. Thank you all for listening.
All right, thank you very much, Alessandro. I'll just share my slides. Okay. All right, I hope you can see my slides. Can you hear me?
It's working fine, James, yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, so I'll try to cover pertaining to the security and privacy aspect of the intelligent robotic system pertaining to the care of people. So there are a lot of interesting aspects here we need to explore. And instead of me presenting the results and findings, I'll be putting more questions which we need to address. Because in the multimodal robotic system, one of the things that we have found, or that we are looking at, or what we see, is there are a lot of people working in making the system work, but the less focus has been really, the real focus has not been given pertaining to the security or the privacy aspect. That is where we come in and say, we want to be pioneer in terms of providing the security and the privacy aspect in a multimodal robotic system. So I will be highlighting a lot of questions rather than providing answers and solutions to the problem. So in a brief, the agenda of today from my side will be, we'll look at the RAS. When I say RAS, means the robotic autonomous system, or the care robot, as we are talking about, not safe without security and privacy protection. And we'll explore into that, and we'll try to understand why. And then we'll look into a bit of the user and the robot and the security association that we need to maintain when we design and develop. And on the third, the system that we are designing or developing needs to be secure from the start, or privacy aspect need to be incorporated from the start, from the design perspective and implementation perspective, not something that we have to add at the end after the product is ready to use or deploy. And then we will also try to look a bit on when and where the privacy could be compromised, and we'll look certain points to conclude the talk. So there are some very interesting fact about, the intelligence threat from the IBM Security X-Force they provided last year in 2022. If you observe the data, most of the attack that happened is obviously not in the healthcare sector, but we stand on the 6th position in the healthcare sector when we talk about cyber attack in terms of any industry that you combine all together. We stand at the 6th position. In fact, in 2021, earlier, we were at the 7th position, and now we are in the 6th position. I don't know this year or the next year if we will go and stand out on the 5th or 4th position, meaning people, the attackers, or the people who are interested in the healthcare sector in terms of the cybercrime or in terms of the cyber threat is increasing at an alarming rate. Now, if you look at it, like it gives a statistic and it says 5.1% of all the cyber tech attacks happen in the healthcare sector. And when we combine and start dissecting into it, and you say, oh, the vulnerability exploitation happens roughly nearly 60%, 57%. That's very, very high. And the phishing attack, 29%, and credentials theft up around 14%, just in general, when we look into the cyber attack model. And if you start looking into the country or the continent wise, you see that when we look at it and says, oh, in Europe, in the healthcare healthcare sector, attack is only 6%. But remember, Europe is a very small part comparing to the rest of the bigger continents. If you look at Asia, You think of it like a population of over 4.5 billion altogether. And the cyber attack in the healthcare sector is 11%. And for Europe, we are roughly probably around 750 or 800 million people. That's like literally Asia is like 6 to 7 times larger than Europe in terms of the population. So you can see when we say 6% in Europe and we say we are the least, we shouldn't be really happy about it, because comparing to them, we are very small. If you can imagine and if you can see and compare the statistic and the geography and the deployment and the need of healthcare sector, depending on the population size and so on. So 6%, in fact, is really high comparing to the population ratio, if you look at it. And interestingly, as reported by IBM, again, that is in 2014, it says 95% of the cybersecurity incidents are due to human error. If that is the case, we have to really pay a very close attention in order to ensure and guarantee that it will, like whatever security mechanism and system that we design, will reduce the human error aspect. And if you look at the UK report, literally, just literally a year ago, if you look at it, it says every 40 seconds, like older people becomes a victim of fraud, okay? Every 40 seconds in the UK. And then you can imagine and now think of the threat or the importance that we need to incorporate when we talk about cybersecurity or the security or the privacy aspect in order to ensure a safe adoption of this amazing technology that Alessandro has been talking about, these care robots, which can do amazing things, which can help and support healthcare sector in an amazing way. Okay. So if we look at the RAS, the robot or care robot, why it is not safe without security and privacy protection in place? There are so many aspects. In fact, there will be even more if we start minutely looking into it. But broadly, if I have to classify, I understand and see them into these 8 different categories. If the data is not confidential, or meaning, in other words, if the data confidentiality is not maintained, obviously people can see your data, people can see what's happening. If the data integrity if not maintained, then how will you guarantee that the data that is provided is the exact data that it was providing? It could be tampered, it could be modified, it could be altered. And what about the service availability? You know, if security mechanism is not in place, you can't really guarantee the availability of the service. It could be there now, it may disappear the next day, it may disappear the next minute. And the server could be down, the system could be down, the data server could be down. And then there could be a lot of things that will stop from making the service available. Even the security mechanism that we have in place, or in fact, in a multimodal robotic system, you will realize that there is very least work done or explored in this domain, okay? So what about the unauthorized access? So if you think of it like literally anybody, if you don't have a protecting mechanism or a mechanism in order to ensure data protection or system protection, literally anybody will be able to access. Think of Alexa. I'll give you an example as we elaborate as we go on. Think of the third party where we rely on the cloud service for computation or for storage. Like, can we really trust them? If there is no security mechanism in place, it's very difficult to trust because they could have manipulated, they could have stolen it, they could have shared it. We would have no idea what is happening behind the scene. And the system could even be weaponized. That's very scary if we think of it. Meaning, in other words, it could be controlled. If you want the system to, or the robot to move left and the instruction is given left, however, it started moving on the right? It's asking to stand, but it started sitting. So it could be destructive in nature, or data could be manipulated, information could be manipulated, and so on. And it will become a honeypot for the intruders. Like everybody will laugh. Why? Because it deals with private, personal information. And no privacy will be safeguarded whatsoever. So whatever information we have, whatever information we are storing, whatever information we are exchanging will not have privacy guaranteed or privacy provided or protected. So you can see the landscape in which this care robot need to really take into account in order to ensure the security and the privacy of the user, of the person who is using this system. And if we look at the security association, it's very interesting. Alessandro did mention about the real-time response. That links with this security association as well. What happens is when we put the security mechanisms and techniques, the overhead in terms of the response time will go down, or in other words, it will go up in terms, delay will go further. What about the RAS resources that we have? Does it really help us to respond in the real time? And then we started looking into, oh, does the mechanism that we have incorporated is something that the user can use? We have to understand the physical condition, the psychological condition, physiological condition of the user. Otherwise, the mechanism that we are designing might be adopted or maybe usable in terms of the RAS resources, in terms of computation and storage and so on. However, the user might not be able to use it depending on his physiological, psychological, or physical condition. So we have to look at a trade-off in terms of which is the best way or the mechanism in order to ensure the system security, in order to ensure the RAS capability, and in order to ensure the adoptability or usability of the system or of the security mechanism that we have incorporated into the RAS system by these users. Another one more very interesting aspect that we need to consider: when we design things, we tend to listen to these regulations, the law, the policies, the standards, because otherwise they will say, oh, it doesn't meet the standard, it doesn't meet the regulation, you did not comply with the regulation, example like GDPR, and then say, oh, you are not following the policies that we have set. So instead of having a system and trying to follow the rules and regulation later on, why not we incorporate these rules and laws and regulations and standards when we are designing and developing the system? So that is what we call and consider as secure by design. So when we are developing this multimodal care robot, since this care robot is dealing with sensitive information, we want to ensure that the compliances, the regulation, the standards are all incorporated in the design and development process and incorporated into the system. Okay, so in terms of the confidentiality, the integrity, the availability, and in fact, just having that is not enough. So we started looking at, oh, I need to have a detecting mechanism. I need to have a filtering mechanism. I need to have a malware detection mechanism. I need to have a kind of threat intelligence to understand why this attack is happening into this robot system and so on. So when we think of all this aspect and when we want to incorporate this, what happens is we seem to have left out with the aspect of the privacy. Because privacy is very subjective in nature if you look at it. Think of it like privacy, what I consider as private might not be something that you consider as private. The thing that we consider as private in this country might not be something that the other country considers private. So it's very subjective in nature. However, it's very critical that we need to incorporate because it links with the personal rights, the choices that you make, the choices that you want, and in terms of the ethical consideration, the legal perspective, or even the social and political acceptance, wherever this region or the country where this robot will be deployed. So because it will be affecting who is collecting the data, why are they collecting this data, what kind of data are they collecting, where are they collecting this data from, or in what method and how they are collecting data, where are they storing this data. So all this question will link with the privacy. I don't want this information to be stored in the cloud. Then what if the service providing is storing that information in the cloud? Because that's your right. If that's your right, there should be a choice that comes along with it, right? So privacy is something that is very complex. However, we need to start incorporating when we are designing and developing this system as a whole. Now, I hope you remember, or I hope you know this, the 3M security glass in Vancouver, Canada, they have put a 3 million in this glass. And then they said, anybody who can break it, you can take this 3 million. Right? So what did they do? What are they trying to do? They are trying to gain confidence by incorporating all the security mechanism in place and say, if you can break it and take the 3 million. That's exactly what we should be looking at when we are designing the system. We have to incorporate the security mechanism and then gain the trust of the user or the buyer or those who are going to adopt this technology. But what happened is they provided a rules and regulation. It says you can kick, okay, you can ram to it. However, you can't pull with a truck. So there is a regulation that they put. But when we start thinking of the cyberspace, it is more complicated than this. Why? Because the one who is breaking the law doesn't care about the rules that we set, doesn't care about the regulations that we set, doesn't care about the laws that we set. So I hope you remember about the other event as well, when Elon Musk was, saying, oh, bulletproof cyber truck. And then he tested in front of the public and then it didn't work, right? So we have to ensure that whatever we are designing, it should be something that it works, not something that it looks like it works, but it should be something that it works. Okay, so let's move to the next step in terms of understanding the privacy. This one is very complex, and then we have to really spend a lot of time probably investigating a lot in order to really understand where we can do what. Suppose like when we are working with this robotic system, which is actually multimodal in nature, that interacts with say through different channels, like say through voice, it could through video, through sensor. So literally is connecting with the environment, right? Like a human being. So in this regard, like there could be a lot of like unintentional data disclosure. That's something that you don't want it, but it happened because you don't incorporate into it. Like if there is someone standing behind me as a robot and my camera is in front of me, I will not know that there is somebody who is standing behind me, and the robot might start talking. But as a user, you may not want the robot to disclose that information. That was very unintentional, you see. So there are aspects that we need to consider how the data could, our privacy could be compromised. And if you look at the like inappropriate data disclosure, think of it like the robot doesn't know who is a small child or is a child or an elder or adult, or what is appropriate in what context. So you are talking something that you may not want to share to a 7-year-old kid. But probably if the robot doesn't understand or distinguish or differentiate between a small child and a big adult, the robot might start talking which might be inappropriate. So you can start seeing the complexity of how the privacy preserving mechanism is much more than just providing data confidentiality. And in terms of the data access control, you can imagine like the data that the system has, it's going to be controlled or managed or need by different stakeholders, the carer, the doctor, the nurse, probably the family member. So how do we let these people access the data in such a way that the privacy of the user is not compromised? In other words, the things that I don't want to show to the doctor doesn't go to the doctor. Things that I want to show to my friends goes only to my friend. So how do I control this data that is in the system? And then the authentication, authorization, or the auditing method, especially the authentication method, is very, very important and critical. Why? Because the user who is using it, like we can't assume all of them to just be able to remember password, all of them to remember passcode. That doesn't work. All of them to just know how to operate with their thumb, with a fingerprint. That might not even work. The person who wants to use might not even have a hand. The person who wants to use might be somebody who can't remember things. So Alessandro has given the perfect example of those children, and it could similarly happen with the rest of us. So if that is the case, we must design in such a way that it fits the requirement and the need of the user. And disciplining the RAS is something that is very, very interesting personally for me. How do you discipline this robotic system so that he behaves like how we discipline our children? We tell them what to speak, when to speak, how much to speak, and where to speak. So can we discipline RAS? If we can, probably we will be able to protect the privacy of the user. Otherwise, it will end up spilling information that we don't want at the wrong time, at the wrong place. And then I was talking about this user constraint. So that was linking with the authentication approach as I was talking. So user has their own constraint. I think people, those who can't remember, we have to design a mechanism that will work for them. People who can't, don't have the ability to walk or to press or to punch in the information, we must have the solution for them as well in order to preserve their privacy. And then there's something called as the system constraint as well. So that one is very important. Why? Because the care robotic or care system, they're expensive. So if they are expensive, probably we just want to have one and then try to serve 10 people. In that regard, in that scenario, now how does the robot maintain the confidentiality, maintain the trust of each of the user while maintaining the privacy when he's engaging with the pool of people? So that's going to be a very, very complex problem, but we need that as well. So in conclusion, so there are a couple of things that I'm concluding here. When we are designing a security and privacy mechanism, we have to look at the user-centric approach. As Alessandro had mentioned earlier as well, it aligns with what I also want to say. When we design things, it's not about just designing and developing something that is amazing in the lab, but people can't really use it. That's why the software developer, they always have to go to the user and say, what's your user requirement? Then only they will develop the product. So for us as well, not just sitting in the lab and trying to design and come up with an amazing security algorithm, but we need to go to these people. And then we have to understand so that our solution at the end is adoptable. At the end is something that they can personalize as per their need and their requirement. So the security and the privacy safeguarding mechanism, whatever we are going to design and develop, should not be something that we incorporate at the end, but it is incorporated during the design and the development process. That is key number one. Number two, the complex security and privacy mechanism that we have been discussing should not become a burden and a barrier to the user. If that is the case, it's going to be very difficult for them. We are not solving problem, rather it is making more difficult for them to use the system. And the third one is something to do with maintaining the integrity of the information, transparency, reliability, accountability, auditability, and traceability. So by doing this, I'm confident that the trustability of the system will increase. And we have to address the scalability when we incorporate a security feature so that it is adoptable at the end. In fact, it should be usable. At the same time, whatever we design needs to abide with the General Data Protection Act regulation that we have for a safe adoption. And the last one, security and privacy mechanisms should not degrade user engagement and interaction experience. That's the take. Just to close with, I will just want to highlight about the Alexa, as I was mentioning earlier. Think of it as an Alexa as a system or a care robot that you are engaging and interacting. Once the passcode Alexa is broken, what happened? Literally, the system is open for anybody to really dig into the information that Alexa has. Could be about your personal information, maybe about the online purchases and orders you have made, maybe about the doctor appointments that you have, and so on. So we really need to start thinking about securing this autonomous robotic care system. Otherwise, we would be in trouble in future in terms of all the cyber attacks that I have highlighted earlier would even go higher, because the data that we are dealing with, they are sensitive, they link with a user and a person. I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much for listening. And here are a few of the references, and the project or the work that we did on the presentation that I've made was funded by UKRAS EPRC network. Thank you.
Thanks, James. That was a wonderful presentation and really fascinating. And also to Alessandro, I think, every time I listen to you two, it sort of reinforces why we work in an interdisciplinary way here at AWRC, because we bring people like you two together to work alongside the rest of the team. And I just think that creates fantastic results, as we've seen time and time again. We've got a little bit of time for Q&A before we go into a wrap up. And I'm going to sort of take chair's prerogative, because there's a question I really want to ask Alessandro, particularly, actually. I don't know if people are aware, but sort of there's a real disconnect between how we in Western societies, particularly in England, actually, don't trust robots, but in places like Japan, they really do. And in Japan, it's interesting because there's a type of thing called karakuri, and it was around in the 1600s in Japan. And that was effectively small mechanized puppets. And that was a cultural thing in Japan that's been there for a long time. So they naturally trust robots, and that's gone through their natural popular culture. In this country, that's not the case. So Alessandro, the question really is that how do we sort of become more like Japan and find ways of having our populations trust these robots that are soon to be in their houses on a daily basis?
Well, thanks for the questions. It's very important to highlight that the answer is what we are proposing. So to involve people in their design, show them that also the limitations, because we need to be honest. If we are honest, they see what is the current state, and then they see how we can improve, and then we can involve it. In other research I haven't mentioned, one of my objective is to make robots that can learn like humans. So they can, like children, you can teach them what you want, and then you can personalize them. So that's one of the main point that we can do to help people to trust them. In Japan, there is, it's a different culture, but also, that the media, they are completely different. So if you see the anime, all the fantasy movies and other things, the robots are the savior of humanity. In our culture, robots are terminators. Of course, that there are not such a thing as a robot as a terminator, I can reassure you, but this is the way most of us see also AI. So AI becomes crazy and kill everybody. That's again not what we are doing here. What we are doing is to create tools that humans can use. The robots, for instance, for therapy, they have controlled autonomy, so they can be always under control of the therapist. They, of course, they have some limited autonomy that is just scripted, so we know already what they are doing. So yeah, there is definitely a cultural reason, but there is also something we can do, and it is involve people and do more of these events where we testimony what we are doing and we explain and we get feedback.
Yeah, fantastic. It's easy for me because I grew up in the 1980s and robots were everywhere in the 80s. So we had this love of Japanese culture. So I'm already a convert, but you know, it's great to hear that so we can build these things into systems. And I love the idea about us training a robot in our own home. So we have some ownership there and gain trust. That's really cool. I'll pick out a few of the questions that were in the meeting chat. I think we should do that. The first one I'll pick out is by, let's have a look, by Saad. Saad, your question was for Jims, I think, and it was, how can this be related with the cloud in cloud robotics, Jims?
Hi, thank you for the question. In fact, it's very interesting. Whenever we bring in cloud, we always have to tie it with the system configuration, network configuration, computation power, the storage ability, and so on. So everything goes back to that real response time. Can I respond in the real time? So whenever we think of it, we have to consider that system requirement. Otherwise, the real response time will never happen. Because, and on top of that, when we are thinking of that securing or secure communication or a secure encryption that needs to go through for connecting from end to end, at that time when it has to deal with the real response time, that's going to be really, really challenging. Just having a, you know, a meeting like this with just only a few people doesn't really need any computation, just like literally just a bandwidth and just we are just talking. Still, like you can see, like our network connection goes down, some couldn't connect, and then, you know, we couldn't hear to someone. Think of it if the robot has to be interacted, engaged with the cloud service or a cloud computation that needs to be deployed somewhere, and we need to get that response. So it will be very fascinating to see. In fact, we are working with one of our PhD students where we'll be using the Google Cloud in order to see the real interaction in terms of the response time and evaluate and check if it will have an amazing, that real-time feel of the response and interaction when we are doing with the cloud service that is provided somewhere else.
That's great. Thank you, James. The next question I'd like to pick up is from Aslam. And Aslam's question was really about human factors. What he said was the human factors should be considered when designing the security and privacy solutions. So I guess to turn it into a question, that would be how? How would we do that? How do we ensure that human factors are considered? To Alessandro, I think, in this instance.
Yeah, I mean, the human factors, it's part of the public engagement we do. We, as I said, showed it as an example. There's that very brief description. Is much more about what we have done. So if you feel free to send me an email, I'll try to explain. So we engage the people, we ask what they need, and then we create a prototype, and then we test the prototype into the real world. We get the feedback from them, and then we understand better, because it's a dual thing. So from our side, we need to understand that, but also from their side, given that these are really new technologies that they don't have, and they also need to understand what they are, and then new ideas can come from. So my example in this is that the Robotira project, when it was written, when it was submitted and it was accepted, so it went all through the academic, and the one of the first point was we need robots to monitor all the people because they may fall down and they need help. You know, you need someone to send an alert. And the place where this happens more often is the bathroom. So then we went to people and they said, no, we don't want a robot that has a camera and then streams it, you know, in my bathroom. So then you have to figure out other things. But also you need to understand, and that is the personalization, because we are all humans, we are all individuals, we all have different things, and there is also the case for equality, diversity. So we are all the same, we have different cultures. So we usually, one of the problems of the AI is that it tries to find the best average that works very well with the majority, but it doesn't work with minorities. So one of our challenge now is how we can make the AI understand that we are not all the same. We are not the prototype human, but we are all individuals, and how we can personalize it. So in this process, we engage people, and then this way we can take care of what they need and the factors. And just let me add this. Please, so yeah. There is another dimension. So when we say people, it's not just the end users. So it's not just all the people, the children, but also those that provide them the services, the parents, the relatives. So it's all the entire system. It's all the people that are involved, the stakeholders. It's all of them. It's not just the end user and that's it. We are asking all of them what they need, and then our challenge is to find out the way to solve all the problems, which is not easy, but happy to tackle it.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Yeah. That's great, thank you. The next question is particularly interesting, actually, by Setera. Apologies if I get the name wrong there, but I read some research recently, I saw some research that was reported recently that was talking about how they had used AI to interpret brainwaves to actually predict images that were created and recreate those images, which was remarkable. And the definition of the image and the specificity was really, really incredible. So I guess that leads me into this next question for Jim's, actually. And the question was from Setera, and it was about, would it be possible to use brainwaves in brackets EEG for authentication, Jim's?
I don't know would be the right answer to start with, because I've never done or work in that area. But yes, in terms of the, I understand and use in terms of the heart rate variability or ECG signals, not the brain wave signals. So probably there is a way, but I don't know because I've never worked or explored in that. But the interest started coming in it became very, very interesting whenever we deal with the biometric information, because this is something that we have. It is not something that we have to remember. So if we can use to uniquely identify the individual, then obviously we can use that as an amazing authentication technique or mechanism. And we are, in fact, one of the projects that one of my students is working on is on the gait analysis to incorporate for continuous authentication and to uniquely identify each of the user by studying the movement of the hands and coordination with the legs. So obviously, I'm sure and confident that there must be a way, but I am not an expert in the brain waves. So
I'm sure if anybody can do it, it will be you and Alessandro, James. I'm conscious of time, so I'd like to wrap up now, because obviously we're snowing heavily outside, so I want to make sure people get home safe. Just a couple of final remarks as we wrap up. Firstly, thanks everybody for coming. It's really appreciated. And I think we had about 61 books onto the call. We'd like to build that even further. You know, public engagement from AWRC is really important for us. A big thank you to Alessandro and James, of course, for both stimulating and wonderful conversation. Please do remember to check out our website for details of future sessions. So do check out our YouTube and look at our blog as well for that. Our next seminar is going to be hosted by our neurological rehabilitation research program. So it'll be really interesting in the leads there. And that will take place on the 16th of May, 2023. Before I say goodbye, very quickly, just to say, it's International Women's Day today. So I'd just like to say thank you to the two women that were behind this presentation. And that's Jen Parry and Ruby as well here at AWRC. Thanks ever so much for your work and for making this happen. It's hugely appreciated. Last thing to say before we close the call, goodbye, and please do take care of the snow. It's really starting to come down. Thanks again. Bye-bye.